Lauren?
Good morning. Hopefully you all can see me. We're trying out a webcam this morning. We'll see how it goes. Thank you all so much for joining us. Maybe you have seen this webinar last year. Maybe this is brand new information and you've never applied to CTAS before. Either way, we're hoping to provide a comprehensive overview of what CTAS is, how it can be used for specifically healing to wellness courts, and what's new this year with the fiscal year 2016 application. We anticipate that this webinar will take about an hour, and we'll also have lots of times for question and answers. As Maria stated, feel free to type in any questions you have as they come to you in that control panel on your right side. We will potentially address them as they come or wait till the end of Q&A if that makes a little bit more sense there. But either way, let's get started. So, I'm Lauren Van Schilfgaard. I'm with the Tribal Law and Policy Institute. I'm the Tribal Law Specialist and the Program Manager for Healing to Wellness Courts. If I have never had interaction with you before, I encourage you to email me anytime. We are a Bureau of Justice Assistance funded training and technical assistance provider for Healing to Wellness Courts. All of those words mean we can provide free technical assistance to any tribe looking to develop or enhance their Healing to Wellness court. I've got a couple on-sites on the calendar right now, but I'd love to help provide any assistance that your court might need. Part of our TA includes providing general webinars, such as on CTAS, which is an extremely important opportunity to help fund our Healing to Wellness court work. Also on the line, we are very honored to have Trish Thaxton, who is a policy advisor with the Bureau of Justice Assistance. Trish, if you want to say hi.
Hi, everyone. I'm really glad that you were able to join us today on the call. Our TA partners at TLPI will be providing most of the information today on the webinar, but I will be here for the duration and will be available to answer any questions that you may have for me when we get to the end.
Thank you, Trish. Also on the line is Sherry Cantalone. She is a grants manager specialist with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. If you want to say hi, Sherry.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be on the call, and I also will be available for questions as they come up regarding Purpose Area 8. So thank you very much.
So this is such a great resource because both Trish and Sherry are the points of contact for Purpose Area 3 and Purpose Area 8 specifically. So we have our line on the pulse as it goes. Very, very neat. Thank you both, Trish and Sherry. So to give a very quick overview of what we're going to be doing today, we're going to be spending 90% of our time on CTAS. But I wanted to draw your attention a little bit to some other opportunities for federal funding for Healing Wellness Courts. Most of these requests for proposals or RFPs haven't come out yet. We anticipate they'll be coming out in January, February. We'll be having more webinars then when those come out, but I just want them to be on your radar. We'll then go through CTAS, and then I'm going to cover some general grant writing tips that have proven pretty successful for all grant applications, regardless of whether they're federal or not. So what we will not be covering, CTAS is a behemoth RFP. It includes 9 different purpose areas covering a whole range of tribal justice system issues. I'm focusing today on Healing to Wellness courts. So if your tribe is considering providing a CTAS application, there's some stuff that I'm not going to be covering here, such as all the purpose areas other than 3 and 8. I want you to be aware of that. Please make sure you go to the CTAS website. They have resources for all of the purpose areas, including an example of what a comprehensive application looks like. That's going to be really important to check out before submitting your final CTAS application. And as I mentioned, I'm going to be touching on some other RFPs, but not going into depth, such as the BJA Adult Drug Court one. So speaking of the BJA Adult Drug Court, I'd consider this the second in line behind major federal funding opportunities for Healing and Wellness courts. CTAS is tribal specific. This BJA Adult Drug Court one is not. It is open to state, county, municipalities, and tribes, but it is drug court specific. This has direct funding earmarked just for drug courts. Tim Jeffries, who I work with pretty extensively as the point of contact, there's his information. As I mentioned, these RFPs come out around January, February, due March or April-ish. There are 2 grants, one for implementation and one for enhancement. The implementation grant, as you might imagine, is for tribes that are just in the planning stages, but pretty far down the planning path, ready to become operational soon, but need some money to maybe hire a key staff member, such as a coordinator, purchase drug testing equipment, things like that. That has a $350,000 grant. It's a straight amount for each grant, unlike CTAS where you provide a budget and the amount can vary depending on the project you're applying for. These are set amounts. The enhancement grant is $200,000 and has those 5 enumerated issues that you can tackle through your enhancement grant. Before, I had been cautioning tribes about this because we hadn't seen a whole lot of success. As you can see, back in 2014, only 1 tribe got one of these awards. It's a lot of work, much like CTAS putting these applications. But last year, 6 different tribes got, 2 got implementation and 4 got enhancement grants. So I think we're starting to see some movement on these. This will be something to keep on the radar. Note that you can apply for both CTAS and for this BJA Adult Drug Court Grant. They are not mutually exclusive. Moving right along, the SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which is a very different organization. I work with them less, but they have a Adult Drug and Family Drug Court Grant. It's under their Treatment Drug Court Grant. It's a little different this last year. In previous years, they specified Healing to Wellness Court Grant. I don't see that this year, but it's still open to tribes, but it's also open to states and municipalities. The funding can be much greater, although sometimes there's a match requirement depending on the grant. They're much more treatment focused, so the grant application is a lot more comprehensive than some of the DOJ grants have been, so just something to keep in mind. I do know they have a joint adult drug court solicitation. The joint means SAMHSA and BJA, and the tribe got one of those last year, so they definitely have tribes on the radar as well. Okay, why we're all here today, CTAS. As many of you, I'm sure, are aware, this was launched back in 2010. So it's not very old yet, but it's starting to get up there. We're starting to get some data back on trends. It was launched in response to tribal leaders' concerns that pre-CTAS, the Department of Justice had all of these great grants, but they were all over the place. There wasn't a set date when RFPs were coming out. You basically needed to have a staff member whose sole job was to track Department of Justice grants and keep a track on what was out there. In response to that, the Department of Justice consolidated or coordinated all of their grants that were specific to tribes, and thus with CTAS. Now, not all DOJ tribal-specific grant opportunities are within CTAS. The grant application notes some, specifically the Sexual Assault Resource Grant. That is a separate RFP, just something to keep in mind. But most tribal justice system DOJ grants are in CTAS. Oh, sorry, I want to go back. This is justice.gov/tribal. That's a website I'm going to keep going back to over and over again. That's where all of the CTAS information is located. If you're at your computer, I suggest maybe going to there real quick and playing around. If you go to justice.gov/tribal, you'll see grants, and right there you'll see CTAS and all of the resources that I'm referring to. So who's eligible? Only tribes. That's a huge plus for CTAS. Unfortunately, we don't like to see tribes competing against tribes, but this is preferable because not only is the pool smaller, but the grant readers are all going to be honed in on tribal issues, which makes your job easier when explaining what it is, the project that you're trying to do through your application. Also new, they had clarified this last year, but it's still available. tribal consortia can apply. For example, last year, the Northern California, about 4 tribes, formed a consortia. They were forming an intertribal court, and they applied as one entity. Doing this, being part of a consortia, does not mean that your tribe can't also submit an application for other purpose areas. It only means that they can't submit a purpose area in competition with that consortia application. But this is a really good opportunity, like it was for Northern California, where small tribes looking to form an intertribal court, but also looking to do some other things as well. So this timeline is the exact same as last year, which is fantastic, but it's a lot earlier than we've seen in previous years. Normally, we're used to seeing the RFP come out in late December and anticipating an application due date of somewhere in March, late March. That's not the case this year, which is why this webinar is taking place now instead of it normally does in January. We're thinking we'll probably repeat this webinar in January because I'm pretty distracted with the holidays coming up, but the clock is ticking, and so it's really good to start considering some of our application strategies right now. So it opened November 19th, which means they use the maximum amount of time that a solicitation can be open, which is 90 days, which is fantastic. But that means that our due date is February 23rd, which is going to come screaming fast when we get back to the offices in January. It's important to note that all applications need to be uploaded through GMS, a grant management system. If you've never worked with GMS before, I highly recommend that you register a domain immediately. You'll need to do that anyways to prepare your application because that's where your budget workbook is, and I'll be talking about that later. But it just takes a while, and the system can get overloaded. So on February 23rd at about 8 p.m. Eastern is not when you should be uploading your application because the system has known to be uploaded, and if your application is not uploaded in time, even if it's finished, it's not going to be accepted, which would be a horrible reason to not get your CTAS application in on time. Some considerations for CTAS generally. All of the purpose areas have been updated to reflect both the Tribal Law and Order Act as well as the VAWA 2013 Special Domestic Violence over Criminal Jurisdiction. If your tribe is considering implementing any of those two provisions, you can apply to CTAS for funding on those. Note, for example, Purpose Area 5, which is the Office for Violence Against Women. They have lots of great funding. They have the biggest pool of money out of any of the purpose areas by far. However, they have a limitation on what you can use that funding for. For example, you can't use Purpose Area 5 funding to fund public defenders. That's something you'll need to look at Purpose Area 3 for. This is all a separate topic for VAWA and TLOA consideration, but I just want that to be on your radar if that's something your tribe is considering. Another consideration, this was the same as last year, but unfortunately because of funding limitations, Purpose Area 4 is still limited to renovation only. They're not supporting any new construction. Things worth noting in this year's application. Like last year, as I mentioned, it's pretty early. The application, so I have the solicitation right in front of me right here, and it notes right on the front page that it's possible that your application, even if it's not funded this year, could be considered for next year's batch of applications. I haven't heard of that actually happening, but note that when you submit your application, it's not dead once that fiscal year ends. It potentially could be considered for future years. One really cool thing, any of you that had Purpose Area 2 funds this year for strategic planning, those were very limited, narrow strategic planning grants, Purpose Area 2, those have been identified as a priority, that if you had Purpose Area 2 strategic plans, those plans are going to be prioritized for funding for this year, which makes sense. You've spent all this money developing this great strategic plan. Now we want to implement the strategic plan. So very exciting. And Purpose Area 3 has been expanded to include the needs of young adults 18 to 25. This is really neat because it makes me think of Shingle Springs in El Dorado County in California. They have a joint jurisdiction court for young adults, and they specifically identified a lot of the issues we're seeing are with kids, with kid developmental brains, but they're over the age of 18. Really, they are acting like adolescents up to 25, so we should provide services like that rather than bringing down the hammer. So I was really happy to see that with Purpose Area 3. What's new this year? As I mentioned, VAWA Special Domestic Violence Criminal Jurisdiction. Big news, OJJDP used to restrict, if you had a current tribal youth program grant, you were not eligible to apply again. You had to wait a year. They have released that restriction. Very exciting. Bad news, the maximum amount of the award has been reduced. It's now only, the ceiling is $350,000, but the restriction brings it in line with the rest of the purpose areas. So we're really happy to see that. Also big, only OJJDP, so not any of the other purpose areas. Purpose Area 3 is a 3-year grant, but purpose areas 8 and 9 are now 4-year grants. So that's also nice, a little bit longevity in what is otherwise 3 years that zip by. So that's very exciting, but worth noting because if you get both purpose areas, you're going to have different timelines for your grant. So back in 2015, what we saw last year, this is a very competitive grant, and your attendance on this webinar bodes very well because you're starting to think about these issues, which is going to be extremely important for putting forth a competitive grant. Last year there were 234 applications, 118 tribes were funded with 210 grant awards. That means, as you can imagine, tribes would get multiple purpose areas. You can look at all of the tribes that were funded. If you go to tribal.gov/tribal or justice.gov/tribal, you can see CTAS grant awards, and those will show you previous tribes that have received awards. Last year, over $98 million were awarded. I highlight purposes area 3 and 8 because unfortunately these are not big purpose areas. They have exactly the topic areas that we want, but unfortunately purpose area 3 only has $12.5 million. Purpose area 8, which is pretty new, only has $3.7 million. So these are going to be pretty competitive. Also, unfortunately, Purpose Area 3 has really suffered financially. They, back in 2010 and 2011, TCAP and ISAP, which are the two funding streams for Purpose Area 3. TCAP is the Tribal Court Assistance Program, and ISAP is the Indian Alcohol and Substance Abuse Program. For our purposes, Healing to Wellness Court, that's a perfect marriage, but it means that people are fighting over both funds now in the same stream when they were combined in 2012. And there's just a smaller and smaller pie going around, which is really unfortunate. So here are the purpose areas. As I've mentioned, we're going to be focusing on 3 and 8, but I want you to know that all of these purpose areas are here, especially when your tribe is coordinating its entire application. You'll want to know who else is applying and what it is they're applying for. I especially want to bring your attention to Purpose Area 5 because, as I mentioned, they have over $50 million. Unlike other funding streams, which are appropriations, dollar amounts set by Congress and at the whim of Congress, Purpose Area 5, through the Office for Violence Against Women, tribes have a percentage set aside. They have a 10% set aside, that whatever funding Congress sets aside, 10% has to go to tribes, which means they enjoy a much, much bigger pie. So whatever your tribe is applying to, I highly, highly recommend that you also throw in an OVW application because the odds of receiving funding are just much greater than they are for other purpose areas. So let's look at the application. The CTAS application packet includes a number of different pieces that all need to be organized and connected to one another. This is what makes it a really difficult application to put together. Here are the different pieces, which are all pretty straightforward. You have your tribal community and justice profile, 30%, your purpose area narrative, 50%, which is a big deal, your budget workbook, which we'll be discussing real quick, and your timeline. An important thing to note with your tribal community and justice profile, you get one of those, regardless of how many purpose areas you're applying for. So if you're applying for all 9 purpose areas, your profile needs to discuss all 9, even though you only get the same page limit. So a lot of coordination involved. Lots of other documents that you can attach, such as letters of support, resumes of key personnel. I highly recommend that you include these. While you have a page limit on what can be included in your purpose area narrative and your profile, you do not on your attachments. So this is an area where you can provide a lot more detail on what it is your proposed project is going to be. So again, justice.gov, they have a CTAS online web tool. It's been the same tool for a couple years now, but it's a good thing to run through, especially if you're going to be the grant writer. I highly recommend it. It'll take about 20 or 30 minutes to go through the whole tool, but it's going to provide all of these big pieces that you'll need to know to pull this application together. So I just want to make sure you do about it. Some big things. If you have ever served as a peer reviewer, you have a really good idea of what it's like reading these applications. If you haven't, I highly recommend you sign up to be one. Very informative. But one thing you know is when you're looking at the CTAS application, they just take you to a website and you're looking at all these file names. And hopefully you can decipher what they all mean, which means as the grant writer, it's on you to clearly label what your attachments are. Unfortunately, you're not presenting the readers with a nice package and a cover letter and beautiful stationery. No, you're sending them basically a thumb drive with all of these file names that they need to be able to read, which means each file name can't be just a blurb of letters, or, you know, final draft 1, final draft 2. No. They need to be very clearly labeled. So, you know, it should be the Tribal Law and Policy Institute, Tribal Criminal Justice Profile, Tribal Law and Policy Institute, Purpose Area 3, Narrative, things like that. Very, very clear. Make sure that you're a separate attachments for all of your things. Some tribes have been known to just submit one document that has all of the pieces labeled out. That's not very helpful because if you're applying to different purpose areas, they're going to go to different readers. A different peer review reader is going to be reading for Purpose Area 1 than for Purpose Area 3. So you want to make sure to break it up by purpose areas. Also, the only format restrictions that we receive is that the document should be double-spaced and that it should be 12-point font. So that means you can use any font that you want. I recommend Times New Roman or Calibri, something really standard that's not going to be distracting. I also recommend, I've seen tribes try and be sneaky and get around the page limitation by using legal size paper rather than letters. I don't recommend doing this. Most of your peer reviewers are going to be printing out your application, and when you use that legal size paper, it messes up all your formatting, your peer reviewer gets flustered, and all of a sudden you've started on a really bad foot just trying to get around the page limitations. Page limitation's rough, but stick with it.
This is Trish, and I just wanted to add one thing to that, which is the narratives are in question and answer format within CTAS. We do ask that you include the question, but you can make those as small a font as you want so that they, rather than taking the 3 lines that they take up in the template itself, you can reduce the font on those to a 6-point font or whatever you need to get it down to 1 line so that you don't lose space to that.
Great tip. That is so great. And that means that they also don't need to be double-spaced. So I'll bring up a snapshot of what those questions look like real quick. Here is a snapshot of some of the resources that you should be pulling. The solicitation itself goes through all of the purpose areas and the information that you need to consider, but it doesn't include the templates that you need to apply. The templates need to be downloaded separately off of this justice.gov website. And so I have little arrows here pointing, to sample purpose area 3, the tribal narrative profile template. As Trish just mentioned, those have specific questions that you need to answer, and those are not included in the solicitation. You need to pick those up separately.
Lauren, I'm going to jump in one more time here because I think that we have resolved that this year. Those should now be accessible on the left-hand navigation bar when applicants are in GMS. They should be able to click on those just like everything else this year.
Hey, that is great to hear. That is great to hear because before you had to go to 3 different places to find this information. Now it looks like you can do everything in GMS. I will note you cannot access the budget workbook on justice.gov. You need to go to GMS, but it looks like everything else is here on justice.gov.
I haven't had the opportunity yet to test it myself this year, but our tech team has told us that's what they've done. So if anybody tries to access those and is not successful, please let us know right away, and we'll make sure that our tech team gets it resolved.
Good, good. So the Tribal Community and Justice Profile, it has 2 pieces. One is the profile itself, and one is this executive summary. The executive summary is worth 5%, but really it's going to be, a check, do you have this, or a minus, do you not have it. This is meant to be a cover sheet for your entire application. It's going to be used by the peer reviewer to quickly look at how many purpose areas are you applying for and what are the problems that you're trying to address, such as substance abuse in your community, high caseloads, youth that don't have anything to do in the afternoon. And so those problems can connect to multiple purpose areas, or they can each be distinct to their purpose area. It can go either way, but really what we want to see is what's included in this application. How many purpose areas are you applying for, and what are the issues that we're trying to address through this application? So 1 page, they have a template, but feel free to organize it so long as you include all of the information that they're asking for on this template. Tribal narrative profile. As you can see from this snapshot, the questions are quite long. This is worth 25% of your score, and you only get 15 pages. As I mentioned, this profile is going to be for all of your purpose area applications. It needs to touch on each problem that you're identifying in further detail in your purpose area narrative, and it needs to touch upon each project that you're proposing. So there needs to be a direct connection between your profile and your purpose area narrative. So if you're applying for both an adult and a healing to wellness court, your adult wellness court under purpose area 3 and your juvenile under purpose area 8, then your profile should talk about the need for both of those adult and juvenile wellness courts. You have substance abuse and alcohol issues in both your adult and juvenile population, and you're looking to address those issues through both of these wellness courts. This includes if you're applying for purpose area 1, for purpose area 2, all of them. Each of these questions has to be addressed. Your peer reviewer is going to treat it like a checklist. Did you answer question number 1? Did you answer question number 2? Even if you don't think that the question is directly applicable to your application or to your tribe's needs, all you can say is not applicable, but it needs to be there. As Trish also mentioned, they want the question spelled out in your application, so you can't just say 1 and then start your answer, but you don't need to have the 12-point double-space font. I would do just as Trish suggested, the 6-point one-line, here it is, here's the question, and then here's my answer in the regular 12-point double-space format, so I can squeeze in as much as I can in those 15 pages. So here's, oh, that was it. So that's the whole profile of just those 5 questions. Your timeline, this happens to be my favorite part of the application, even though it's only 5% of your score. This is because the narrative, 15 pages, just does not even seem to scrape the surface on the level of detail that I want to go into, because you're asked to both identify the problem and your proposed project. It's double space, that space just goes so quickly. But your timeline is a place where you can expand into a lot more detail on what it is you're going to be doing, as well as provide a timeline on how it is you're going to do. So you're applying for a Healing to Wellness court. You're already in operation, but you want to do some significant enhancements to your phases. You want to hire a coordinator, and you want to attend 3 trainings, 1 a year for the 3 years. In your timeline should include, we're going to put out a solicitation for the coordinator position in month 1. We're going to interview in month 2. We're going to hire in month 3. We are going to, have a strategic planning meeting on our phases in month 3, and we're going to meet quarterly for each month about our phases. Each year we're going to attend this training. We're going to have follow-up in the following months after that. Things like that to really spell out your objectives of your project. There's where you can provide the detail that you didn't have the space for in your purpose area narrative. Things that they specifically identify in the solicitations that they want to see in the timeline, they want you to indicate each objective and major task. You may have a lot of objectives, you may have just 2 or 3, but they want them broken down here in the timeline. They want assigned responsibility. These aren't, lofty goals. We want to reduce recidivism. Yes, that's a big goal that we have, but the way we're going to get at it are these specific items that the coordinator, that the judge, that the probation officer are going to be in charge of. They want them to be reasonable. They're going to mark you down if you put, 99 different tasks that you're going to do in 1 month. Well, that might be really lofty of you, but we just don't think that's very reasonable. So you might get marked down. So they want to see, no, this is something that you can actually pull off, especially because most of us have full-time jobs on top of this additional project that we're taking on. So here's a sample timeline, very, very basic on their template, but I would highly recommend that you use this to be extremely organized and extremely visual in order to give your peer reviewer a really quick overview of what your project is going to be. Organization is the key here. Your peer reviewer is going to be looking at 15 different applications, and if they have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out how your timeline works, they might give up, and you don't want them to do that. So make it really, really clear, very obvious. Your workbook, I've been referring to this. This is 15% of your score. This includes 3 different pieces: your demographic form, your budget detail worksheet, and your budget narrative. This is going to be your finance person that's going to be helping to fill this out, but just like your tribal justice narrative and your purpose area narrative, there needs to be connections between the budget and your narrative. So here's a snapshot of some of the worksheets. This is the budget narrative. So, it's going to ask, you're applying for a Healing to Wellness court, you want to hire a project coordinator. How much is that going to cost? What is their salary going to be? Why is their salary this? What are their duties going to be? Why is this a necessary part? A lot of tribes, for some reason, do not fill out the narrative, or they'll put, see purpose area narrative, or, they'll put something just as simple as, hire project coordinator. That is not good enough. It needs to be detailed and connected to your objectives that you spelled out in your purpose area narrative. It doesn't need to be a page long. It needs to be just a solid paragraph of what each line item is going to include. Here's your budget summary. This is going to be for all the purpose areas that you applied for. So let's say you're applying for purposes area 3 and 8. At the bottom it's going to be, we're requesting, $350,000 and $200,000, and it should all line up and add up so that the peer reviewer can look at your budget summary, compare that to your executive summary, and say, yep, they said they were going to apply for purposes area 3 and 8. Here's 3 and 8, and here's what they're asking for. I can connect this to the objectives that they want. All the lines should be able to connect. Here's your demographic form. This is truly like the executive summary. Do you have this or do you not? Check or minus. But take the time to fill it out. This is asking the population size of your community, where you're located, really basic demographic information that can be easy to forget. But these are points that you don't want to leave on the table, so make sure that you fill this out. Other attachments, as I mentioned, letters of support, job descriptions, memorandum of understanding. The MOUs, really, really important if you're doing Healing to Wellness Course Day and you're going to be teaming up with your local law enforcement or maybe another sovereign, maybe with the county. This is where you can put in, like, look, we've already done significant coordination with all of the parties that are going to be involved in this project, and they've all agreed to do this. But it can even be as simple as, we have a Healing to Wellness Court team that includes behavioral health, social services, and the court, and we have an MOU between those three agencies where we all agree to participate on the team. That can be really powerful to show this isn't just an idea, we've done some concrete actions to make this happen. I think those can be really, really good. So I mentioned no page limit, but they did say there's a 20 megabit size limit, so it can't be infinite, nor should it be. If it's too big, then a peer reviewer isn't going to look at it at all. But use it wisely because you're not limited to those 15 pages. The purpose areas. This is the meat and potatoes of your application, 50% of your score. So as I mentioned, I mentioned all of this before. Your narrative space is going to go quickly because they're asking a lot of you in a little bit of space. They want you to identify the problems. So this is going to be our substance abuse and alcohol abuse that's in our community, our program design and implementation. These are going to be very complicated meta questions that you need to distill down into 7 pages, double-spaced. Your capabilities and competencies. This is, we have a judge who had formal training at the Tribal Healing to Wellness Court training in September. We have access to these resources. Each of our team members has 15 years experience in their respective fields, things like that. That's where your resumes can come in handy to support that section, as well as your impact and outcomes and evaluation. I'll be talking about performance measures in just a little bit. So Purpose Area 3. This is a big one. As I mentioned, 2 different funding streams. I apologize, that should be ISAP, not ISAS. They estimate about $16.8 million. As that previous graph showed, for the last couple of years, they've been distributing around $12 million. But they estimate around 20 to 30 awards. They have a pretty big range between $250,000 and $750,000. That means if you're going to apply to this purpose area, your budget needs to be at least $250,000 and no more than $750,000. Now, it's very tempting to apply for the ceiling. No reason not to, except there needs to be a connection between what it is you're asking and how much it costs. You can't apply for a project coordinator and say that you're going to be paying them, $500,000 a year if that's not a market rate. There needs to be a connection between what it is you're proposing, what it's going to cost. This is a 3-year grant. They mentioned this is an extremely competitive purpose area. That's because there's a lot in here. So I like this purpose area because it's, as I mentioned, the marriage between tribal courts and substance abuse, which is exactly what we're doing in Healing to Wellness Court. They specifically identify Healing to Wellness Courts as a fundable project under Purpose Area 3. But they also identify a lot more. This is just the sampling: tribal courts, jails, risk and needs assessment, treatment, law enforcement, re-entry. Lots of different tribal programs are applying for Purpose Area 3. It's possible even within your tribal community there are going to be different ideas of what should be asked for in Purpose Area 3. Now, because there are 2 different funding streams for Purpose Area 3, that Tribal Court Assistance Program and the Indian Alcohol and Substance Abuse Program, you could get 2 different awards for 2 different projects. Let's say you want to get a treatment services program as well as law enforcement. You could apply for both in your Purpose Area 3 narrative, and BJA could say, yep, those are 2 distinct projects that fall under these 2 different funding streams. We'll fund both. It's still
Lauren.
Yes.
Lauren. Hi. Sorry, I just want to jump in and say that you're absolutely right that two different projects, and actually I'm going to go back first and say the range that we identify in the application is 250,000 to 750. 750 is a pretty hard top number simply because of the limited amount of funds, but we certainly do and will receive applications for and fund applications for less than the 250,000. That's just a typical range, but we have funded applications that were for $94,000 because that was exactly what the tribe needs. So if there's a very specific, it's a lower amount, please don't let that bottom number discourage you from applying. And then to speak to the two different distinct projects that you want to fund within Purpose Area 3, that's definitely something that you can do. It would be made as a single award. It would not be two separate awards. We used to have separate funding streams for tribal courts and the Indian Alcohol and Substance Abuse Program. Congress changed the way our funds were appropriated 2 years ago, so that's actually appropriated as a single funding stream at this point, and so we can make one award even though it will cover different project areas in different offices potentially within the tribe.
So yeah, both good things to consider. And if you look on the BJA awards, like last year, fiscal year 2015 for Purpose Area 3, you'll see they mostly range in the $300,000 to $400,000 range. So here's a snapshot of the Purpose Area 3 narrative template. These are all of the questions that you're going to be expected to answer in your narrative, regardless of whether you're applying for Healing to Wellness Court, reentry, treatment. These are the questions that need answering. So remember, those 15 pages go quick. The questions continue. There are 12 questions with subparts. Again, remember to spell out the questions in your narrative. But if a question just doesn't apply, then say it doesn't apply. So some things to think about when structuring your narrative. Consider that the peer reviewer may or may not have Healing to Wellness Court experience. The Purpose Area 3 is big. It's a behemoth. And so the peer reviewers might be coming from a whole range of backgrounds that might not be Healing to Wellness Court specific. So you might be needing to explain what a Healing to Wellness Court is as part of your narrative. I have this on here because Purpose Area 3 is not Healing to Wellness Court specific. I think you can kind of get lost a little bit in where to go. So I look to the BJA Adult Drug Court RFP for guidance because it's drug court specific, and so it asks very specific questions about drug courts. And so these might be helpful things to put into your own narrative, such as, are you going to be doing randomized drug testing? Are you going to have evidence-based treatments? Why or why not? Things that you would be putting in a drug court application, make your CTAS application a drug court application because that's what it is you're doing. Purpose Area 8, which is Healing to Wellness Court specific, brand new as of 2015, so this is second year. It used to be juvenile justice, and now it is specific to Healing to Wellness Courts. They estimate about $4.8 million. Last year they distributed about $3.7 million. They guesstimate around 10 to 15 awards, but remember this is for a 4-year grant, not just 3 years. Last year, so these were kind of funky numbers that they had in their frequently asked questions. They noted they received 17 applications, but only 1 was awarded. But when you look at the awards, 12 were actually awarded. So I think there was just a lost crosshair in there. But 12 tribes received funding under this purpose area last year. Sherry, who's on the call, is the main point of contact for Purpose Area 8. Last year, this purpose area was specific to underage drinking. It identified underage drinking as its main focus and wanted to fund Healing to Wellness Courts that were focused on this issue. It's open to wellness courts that are either already operational or looking just to implement. They have broadened their view now to alcohol and substance use, but alcohol is still specifically mentioned. And because of the focus last year on underage drinking, I think you should really hone in on this alcohol issue of why you're going to be addressing alcohol, or if you're not, because the data in your community just doesn't identify alcohol as the main issue, why that's the case. But it should be one way or another that you can't just ignore the alcohol issue. You need to be either specifically focused on it or stating why you're not. One important thing to note here is the RFP does make specific reference to the tribal 10 key components. Purpose Area 3 does not, but I do recommend in both 3 and 8 to reference the 10 key components and how you'll be complying with those. They're applicable to both, and it will be a red flag if you don't mention the 10 key components. So these are some items that they've identified that you can fund under Juvenile Healing to Wellness course. Your basic things such as staffing, equipment, training for Healing to Wellness course. They also have specific limitations that 3 does not, such as because it's Healing to Wellness court focused, no violent offenders can be part of this. It's a juvenile Healing to Wellness court, so this shouldn't be such a big issue as it is an adult drug court. The purpose area already includes technical assistance. A TA provider has already been identified. And with Purpose Area 8, it's a lot more structured than 3 is. Purpose Area 8 has its own built-in timeline in which, as a grantee, you'll be expected to build your own strategic plan with your TA provider and then implement that plan for the remainder of the grant period. So TA is already part of that, but also know in your timeline, you should be including this very structured timeline that they want to see you participate in, including the strategic planning. Part of that strategic planning includes this additional travel. There's one more additional trip. For Purpose Area 3, you'll be traveling to a general CTAS orientation and a Purpose Area specific orientation. For 8, you'll be traveling to both of those, as well as the specific 3-day strategic planning meeting. So all of those trips should be in your budget. Here's a snapshot of the Healing to Wellness court narrative. Remember, quite exhaustive, though pretty comparable to 3. So if you're putting both applications together, it should be familiar. As I mentioned, drug courts, the best guidance we have is from the BJA Drug Court RFP. So if you're looking for great language or you just don't know how you want to structure it, this can be really, really good prompts for what to include. I also highly recommend the Healing to Wellness Court publication, which is tribal focused. That, like this webinar, are free on our website, wellnesscourts.org, part of the publication series. I think the 10 key components are a pretty good way to structure it to touch on all of the big points that you want your Healing to Wellness court to touch on. So the performance measures. So as part of your grant application, you will not be expected to submit specific performance measures, but you will be expected to identify how it is you're going to measure the success of your project. Pretty reasonable, and the good news is that unlike other projects, which may be like the Tribal Youth Program, a brand new project, after-school program, we don't have a great way to measure success. Healing to Wellness courts have been around a while, and we do have very specific measures that can help us satisfy this. So as I mentioned, they're not required, but they want to see you thinking about it. So in the solicitation, they have some suggested performance measures. But Purpose Area 3 is so broad, it's so big, that these are really, really a little too broad for our needs, right? They're asking how many cases were filed, how many arrests. We're looking for something a little bit more specific. Purpose Area 8 gets added a little bit more direct because it's specific to Healing to Wellness courts. So they suggest things like the number of program use. And when you're discussing your performance measures, you're going to be saying, we're going to be collecting the number of youths who reoffend. And we can track this because, we have a tribal police department, or we have an MOU with our neighboring county, or something like that. I recommend, again, returning to that BJA Drug Court RFP and checking out what their performance measures are. They get real specific, such as the number of participants that were admitted in our program, the number of participants who graduated, the number of participants who enrolled in our program and didn't reoffend for a year, didn't reoffend for 2 years. Those are the kind of numbers that get right at to our Healing to Wellness court. Here's some more. Drug testing is another great way to show performance measures with data that we're already collecting, so it's less of a burden on our court. The RFP, because, at least for Purpose Area 3, because it's not Healing to Wellness court focused, doesn't hone in on evidence-based programs or practices, but we know that that's a really big issue for Healing to Wellness courts and for drug courts. There still remains, unfortunately, little to no evidence-based programs that are tribal-specific, but nevertheless, they are a priority within the field, and hopefully we see some soon. We should at least be considering what's out there. These are 3 resources that have registries for evidence-based practices. I recommend checking them out. They may or may not be relevant to you, but I think these are programs that you should be aware of, and certainly terminology that you should be aware of. Another tip, I believe BJA is backing away from using the 7 design features, but they still pop up now and again. These are related to the 10 key components, though it's not exactly clear how they interrelate, but nevertheless, they have identified the 7 design strategies as important things to consider for a drug court or Healing to Wellness court. Maybe this is a more effective way for you to tackle conceptually your application than the 10 key components are. Maybe it's not, but just want you to know it's out there. I also wanted to point out Purpose Area 9. I haven't focused any attention on it, but it is a possible purpose area where you could apply for more Healing to Wellness court funding. Purpose Area 9 is the Tribal Youth Program under the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. This is a broad category, much like Purpose Area 3, but a small pool of funding, unfortunately. But I want you to know it's there, especially if your tribe is going to be also applying for Purpose Area 9. It's a great opportunity to connect how your 8 and 9 applications are going to work together. Cara, who's not on the call with us, is the point of contact, but there is her contact information. And you know, I put this asterisk. I don't think that is applicable anymore. Sherry, maybe you can correct me. I believe current TYP grantees are eligible to apply.
That is correct, Lauren.
That is cool. So that's brand new this year. That's really cool. So I think these are all things that I've mentioned previously, but some really great pros about CTAS are that it's tribal specific, so our peer reviewers are going to be hopefully familiar with Indian country, familiar with a lot of the issues and problems that we're discussing, such as a real lack of Indian-specific evidence-based practices. Nevertheless, it's really important in your tribal narrative, your profile, to discuss your community as if the peer reviewer has no idea what you're talking about. Assume they've never been to your region of the country, they've never been to your tribal community, and explain it from the very beginning. Purpose Area 3 has, you know, all of the topic areas that we like to see. There's no match requirement in CTAS. In a lot of these federal grants, you see that you're like, sure, you can apply for $500,000, but we need you to, you know, match that funding with outside money. No requirement here for that. And maybe your tribe is already planning to submit a CTAS application, so the wheels are already turning and you can just jump on the bandwagon with a great Healing to Wellness court purpose area. Some cons. There's not a wellness court specific solicitation, at least for adults. There is for juveniles, which means that for Purpose Area 3, you're going to have to do a lot of educating for what a wellness court is. Purpose Area 3 is huge. And the CTAS application, as I'm sure you all are well aware by now, is complex. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of coordination required on your part with all of the different tribal agencies that are going to be needed to put together this comprehensive application. in 2.5 months. It's a real challenge. There's no bones about it, but it's absolutely worth it. So I just wanted you to be aware of some general CTAS funding trends. We had been seeing a really steady decline up until 2014, and we're really excited that last year we saw a bump in the money. It's certainly no 2010 dollars, but it was the first time we saw an increase, which is really exciting. We have been seeing an increase in the number of tribes that have been awarded, which is also exciting because if you've ever been to a consultation, you know that tribes are not pleased about the prospect of having to compete against each other for these really limited dollars. Thankfully, the competition seems to be loosening up just a little bit. It's hard to say, though, because I think, on the other hand, more and more tribes are applying, which means the onus is on us to put together as an organized and comprehensive application. But the truth is, because of the competition, every tribe has needs, and every application is going to identify very serious problems that need addressing. And some applications are just not going to get funded, even though they very well deserve to. And that's a harsh reality going into this. There are some reasons that applications don't get funded, even if the problems are very real. And I want to make sure all of you avoid these issues, that you do not get put in the reject pile unnecessarily. There were those questions on all of the narratives. Each one of those needs to be answered. I know it seems like, yeah, but once you get started writing, you're going to have this beautiful narrative that can't be edited. It needs to all be in there, and you're going to sacrifice the last 3 questions because they're not relevant anyway. Don't do it. Make room for those last 3 questions, because what they're going to do is they're just going to mark off points right there, and even though your narrative was beautiful, you're going to get knocked down points unnecessarily. The connections are very serious. I know that's what I look for as a peer reviewer. I want to see really, really obvious lines between your executive summary, between your budget, and between your narrative. They all need to connect. It seems easy right now, but when you have 3 different people working on those documents, it can get really tricky. So make sure you build in a couple days before you turn in your application to ensure that all the connections are there. As I mentioned, different writers. There's not a great way to avoid this. No one person can put all of this together, but just make sure there's some flow to your writing. I think general grammar and typos can really hurt an application because there's so many valid applications out there. Peer reviewers are going to be looking for anything to mark you down, to make it easier on them to pick who should be funded. So make sure that you're not making it easy for them. Grammar mistakes should not be anywhere near your application. Just some tips. Obviously, you read the solicitation cover to cover. It's big. It's 60 pages, but it can be done. Ensure that, as we mentioned today, not all of the information that you need to put together an application is in the solicitation. You need to go look at those templates. I also highly recommend checking out their frequently asked questions. Those bring up some issues for me. It's like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Very approachable. It's right on that justice.gov page. As I mentioned, GMS can be a little tricky, and it doesn't like a lot of people logging on at the same time. Do not wait till the last minute to submit your application. We know firsthand that your application can be denied because it wasn't uploaded because GMS crashed. Don't do it. At least give yourself 24 hours to submit your application on time. Yeah, I mentioned make sure your budget and your profiles are all connected. Some more general tips. Contact Trish, Sherry, whoever other point of contact for your purpose area. If you have any questions at all, even if you just want to clarify that you're going in the right direction, they're there to answer your questions. Note that CTAS is a coordinated application, which means 1 application per tribe. You can't submit separate applications for each purpose area. What's going to happen is, let's say you submit 2 different applications for 3 and 8. Whichever one received last let's say 8 was left, that's what they're going to take as the CTAS application. So purpose area 3 won't even be considered. It all needs to be one application. Include all of your required documents, your budget. Again, it seems obvious, yet lots of tribes leave lots of blank spaces. Don't do it. And make sure you answer all the questions that they ask of you. These are things that I mentioned. Again, serve as a peer reviewer if you haven't before. That is the best education to know what it is that the readers of these applications are looking for. If you've ever applied unsuccessfully, last year they had a really great program at the Indian Nations Conference for tribes that had not received a CTAS application. I thought that was a really good program. There are resources out there. Request comments on your unsuccessful application. Peer reviewers make comments in the margins and have to write them when they upload their comments. You have a right to see those. You just need to request them. So make sure you request them to see what it was that wasn't jiving with the peer reviewers.
And I'll add, this is Trish again, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just want to add on that the peer review comments were sent to the authorizing official with every single letter that was sent out indicating that an application was not funded. It's usually the chairman, the governor, whatever the leader of your, and they should have received those comments via email on or around September 30th, maybe slightly before September 30th this past year. If for some reason they cannot find those comments, they are the individual who needs to request that they be resent in order to protect the privacy of the tribe, to protect, goes for all applicants for any of our programs, from someone who doesn't have a right to have access to that private information. We have a policy that we can only release that with written authorization from the authorizing official identified on the application. So that person can just send us an email saying, I'd like the comments again, and please also send them to, and indicate the other people they need to be sent to. That's fine, but we have to have the authorization from the individual who's listed on the application.
Okay, good to know. Track that person down. A couple of recommendations that are just from our own experience at the Tribal Law and Policy Institute. You have a page limit of 15 pages, but you're not required to use all 15 pages. We would recommend you do. There's not a lot of space for a lot of information that you're squeezing in, and if a peer reviewer sees blank space, that it's not in the actual scoring criteria, but it might be seen as, look, your problems might not be as serious as other tribes that needed this extra space, or your program design isn't fully fleshed out. Use all of the space if it's given to you. Formatting can get funky depending on what computer program your peer reviewer is using. Things can get messed up, margins can get weird. So we recommend PDFing all of your application materials before you upload it to preserve that formatting so that it's the same for each peer reviewer. Again, you don't want to be punished because your formatting didn't translate. So we recommend PDFing, though a Word doc is perfectly acceptable. Here's my information if you would like to follow up on any of the information that was in this webinar. I'll be posting the slides for this on wellnesscourts.org, and then as Maria mentioned, in about 72 hours we'll have a recording of this webinar. Here's wellnesscourts.org, a snapshot of our homepage. TLPI also has a new website, home.tlpi.org. If you haven't seen it yet, lots of great resources on here where you can learn more about TLPI. We're very proud of this website. And then here is a snapshot of some more CTAS webinars that the Department of Justice will be doing. They're not Healing to Wellness Court specific. They're much more general, but as you can see, tomorrow they're having a budget development webinar. That might be worth checking out. They're all free. You can register for the ones tomorrow and on the 16th on their website. Again, if you go to justice.gov/tribal and you click on Training and Technical Assistance on that margin there and TTA events, that's where you can find this page. And now, if you have any questions, we invite you to type them into your questions bar or into the chat section, especially because Trish and Sherry are here to help answer any questions you have, especially if they're specific to purpose areas 3 and 8, but they do not have to be. So I have a question, and this could be to either Sherry or, well, maybe to Sherry. If we have a family healing to wellness court that serves parents with the dependency, and we wanted to serve the juveniles, is that something we could do under Purpose Area 8?
So the question is, if you have a family situation?
Yeah, and we wanted to, provide a holistic services for the whole family.
Okay. To be truthful, we are not really dictating ourselves what the tribal scenario is for their particular healing to wellness court. The point of Purpose Area 8 in this particular instance is to look at what already exists, and it's really up to the court leadership and personnel to determine their policies, their procedures, their infrastructure, what they already have in place to address the age group and the youth that are at risk of utilizing alcohol and other drugs. And so the idea then is for them to look at what already exists, if they have a pre-existing court, and to determine what would enhance or expand the capacity of the court to address the situation. So in answer to your question, Lauren, if they have a particular approach in their court that includes the family members in the process of assisting the young people that they are wanting to work with, then we would have no objections that I can think of to that particular scenario, as long as it's a common part of their particular program. The age group that we are targeting, of course, are the young people who are younger than 21 that would tend to come into contact with Healing to Wellness Court and would have these issues that need to be addressed. So there are assessment tools that a court would use to make those determinations. They need to look at that. They often need to have relationships with other jurisdictions who also are maybe non-tribal and may encounter these young people. There's a myriad of possibility for how you would enhance what you are already doing, and our point here is to give them that opportunity, and with a dedicated training and technical assistance provider, encourage their strategic planning and give them the opportunity to maximize the work that they're doing with the young people, and potentially family members as well, I would assume, could be done. It would be up to the court to explain how they utilize that approach.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That sounds great. And you mentioned the age 21. Purpose Area 3 identified young people between 18 and 25 as a priority target population, which is going to be different than Purpose Area 8, where they're looking to target youth under the age of 21.
It does have the potential, I think, also for broadening the options of working with a range of age level for the children that can be affected by alcohol and or other drugs. Mm-hmm.
Very good. Well, I don't see any questions on our little questions bar. But if a question comes to you later in the day, later in the week, for some reason over the holidays while you're enjoying your families, feel free to send me an email at any time. I can certainly tackle it if it's beyond my wheelhouse, I can definitely get in contact with Trish and Sherry. Our priority is to help you put together as beautiful of an application as possible for Healing to Wellness Courts. So please feel free to reach out at any time. And I'd like to thank you all for joining us. This is a pretty big deal, joining a webinar this early in the application process. I'm really happy to see all of your wheels turning. Thank you, Trish and Sherry, for joining us and sharing your expertise. And as Maria posted, there's my email, lauren@tlpi.org. If we go back on the slide. Wellness@tlpi.org reaches me just the same. And I guess with that, we will conclude the webinar. I don't know if Sherry or Trish have any closing words they'd like to share.
Just my appreciation.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to express appreciation for the good information shared, Lauren. Thank you. And looking forward to seeing the applications from those who are interested in applying. We're excited about that.
Thanks. And I'll echo the same sentiments. And again, thank everyone for being here. And Lauren, I just want to thank you again for a very informative and clear, helpful presentation today. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Trish and Sherry, and thank you all. And as I look forward to seeing you in the future at a training or otherwise. Take care and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.